One of my favourite things about Doctor Who is the idea of a shared universe. The Doctor zips around in space and time so much that they would definitely run into some familiar faces now and again. Usually the returning monsters and villains are Daleks, Cybermen and Time Lords, but every now and then there is an uncommon monster that returns after its initial appearance. One of these monsters are the Ood, first introduced in The Impossible Planet in Series 2. These docile alien servants had been a minor part of the two-part story, but showrunner Russell T Davies was keen to revisit them in a later adventure. This desire would come to fruition in the Series 4 episode Planet of the Ood, written by Keith Temple. This episode sees the Doctor and Donna arrive on the icy cold Ood sphere, where a corporation is exploiting the native aliens and selling them off as slaves across the universe. Despite being pretty acclaimed upon its release, the episode often finds itself overshadowed by Fires of Pompeii before it. But does it deserve more recognition for its biting exploration of slavery, or does it struggle too much from pacing issues and weak characters? Well, grab your translatable and drink your Ood tonic, because it's time to take a deep dive into Planet of the Ood.
The Doctor and Donna visit Planet of the Ood to free them from slavery!
I love the cold open of the episode. It's a corporate advert for the Ood with a lovably cheesy voiceover explaining the driving force of the creature, which is to serve. This had already been established in The Impossible Planet, where we first met the Ood, but this opening is another quick way of showing it, catching people up if they hadn't seen that earlier story. Much like Mr. Businessman here says, it's straight to the point, which is quite a meta line when you think about it. The episode is all about the Ood being slaves, so you need to get that aspect of their existence established right off the bat, and that's what this short advert does. Quickly explaining this is what they're all about, since there had been that large influx of viewers between the two Ood stories, so a lot of viewers would be unfamiliar with the creature. It's one of the reasons cold opens like this work so well for Doctor Who. Instead of our big scene being the Doctor and Donna arriving on the planet, we get this smooth exposition that wouldn't really have been able to fit anywhere else in the episode, setting up the Ood themselves and the corporate presence of the episode, establishing how this corporate slave trade is run and marketed. It's so normalised, like any other business. You could swap this advert out for an advert about Hoovers and it would have the same effect to the people within the story, because that's just how normal it is to own an Ood. Even though these people are selling sentient, living creatures as servants, they're so nonchalant about it, and that's horrifying to think about. So the opening does a good job showing that mass desensitization. Mr. Bartle then gets killed by an Ood in the same way they killed in the Satan Pit, even with those same bright red eyes. I think this is clever because it plays on the viewer's familiarity with the Ood doing this, remembering that previous episode. It follows those conventions, but we also understand this isn't how they should act. In that earlier story they were under the influence of the Beast, so we know there's something similarly influencing them here. As I said, this opening basically tells you everything you need to know. It sets up how the business operates, what the Ood are, and that they kill people in this way. It establishes everything important about the episode in such a short and smooth scene, using that cold open format to its full extent.
Do you take milk and sugar?
There's a really good moment of the Doctor and Donna in the TARDIS, both of them excited to step out into the alien world awaiting them. It's important to note that this is Donna's first trip to an alien planet, along with it also being the first episode shot because of scheduling chaos. Donna has been to the beginning of the Earth and the destruction of Pompeii, but this is the next level, the final frontier. This is a regular person with a boring life on Earth about to set foot on a completely different world for the very first time. So I like that they address her chaotic mix of emotions, how she's excited but equally terrified. It's a very natural reaction for someone to have in this position, especially because she already knows everything the TARDIS can do. It's not like Rose, who still had doubts as to whether they could really travel through time and space, so she was cautious. Donna, on the other hand, has already experienced these travels firsthand, so she's just excited to get out there. Much like Partners in Crime, it plays on the evolution of the audience as well, who also know what the TARDIS is capable of since they've seen episodes before. Much like Donna, they just want to get out there and see a new world too. It's also a nice touch that the Doctor admits he has that same excitement and fear each time as well. The Doctor is anywhere between 900 and a few thousand years old by this point. Yes, Voyage of the Damned says 903, but then you have to factor in the third Doctor, the TV movie, Orbis, the War Doctor. It's a bit complicated. But my point is that this character is so old you'd think they wouldn't see anything new or consider anything special, but thanks to the companions, they still do. In the meanwhile, in the TARDIS minisode, the 11th Doctor explains that he has companions because he can experience the adventures through their eyes and live vicariously through their excitement. I think this scene at the start of Planet of the Ood puts forward that same idea. They may be a Time Lord with dozens of faces and thousands of years behind them, but thanks to the people they travel with, they never get bored of it, never get tired of it. And I just think it's a great character touch to show the childlike wonder and curiosity of the character is still there after all these years. Then we see the first proper alien planet of the Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who, which looks great thanks to CGI creating these great vistas and scenery. Yes, we had been to New Earth, but that was just a carbon copy of Earth and not really satisfyingly alien enough. The planet in the Impossible Planet was also technically a planet, but was more just a giant barren planetoid, which was also the same with Utopia. None of the planets before had really felt special or alien, but this is the first time, a big moment, so there's a nice build up, just for Donna to step outside and find out it's freezing cold and snowing. This is a nice comedic moment that mirrors Martha's first experience on another world, since she stepped out of the TARDIS into the pouring rain of New Earth. I think these kinds of moments keep the era grounded, because it strips away the traditional mystique of alien planets, by reminding you they're just normal planets at the end of the day. They have the same kind of basic weather issues as our own. This is a picturesque planet with amazing views, another planet glistening in the sky, but Donna can't really take it in or enjoy it because it's so cold. I find it very human and relatable, which is nice because I feel like we've all had those moments where you go somewhere really special, but you can't enjoy it because your feet hurt or you need the toilet, so you're too distracted to take in the wonder of it all. The Doctor then gives that great speech about how Donna has gone from this regular life to being on this alien world, and it's a really special moment. This great piece of music playing as he lists off the mundanity of human life on Earth, how Donna has escaped to this kind of place we all dream of going, only for it to then pan to show that she's gone back into the TARDIS to get a nice warm coat to combat the cold weather. It's a great piece of comedy that shows why these two are such a good pairing. The Doctor is lost in his own speech, talking up how special this moment is, just for Donna to be more concerned about having a coat and comparing the rickety old TARDIS to a rocket that flies above them. It's this kind of dynamic that makes them so lovable because they have these great moments and play off each other so well.
Can you hear anything inside that? Pardon?
But because this is Doctor Who, things aren't as they seem, as Kleinman arrives to get some answers from the complex, which has seen multiple deaths recently. And that's a big deal, because it affects that lovely bottom line. This scene once again shows that heavy corporate framing of the story, picking up where the cold open left off since it explores the direct aftermath of it. These people seeing that it's the Ood killing people, because of something called Red Eye, which is essentially rabies. It answers that question from the cold open as to why they're acting this way, even without a giant red devil beast possessing them. These are sentient life forms, after all. It only makes sense for them to develop forms of psychosis or rabies, because these are common things to develop. The Doctor and Donna then find an Ood in the snow, which is the rogue one from the beginning. I love that they immediately go to help him since he needs their help, and this is the Doctor, who always tries to save as many lives as possible. It shows that deep compassion for any form of life, since he wants to help, even if he doesn't know how to, because he doesn't know where an Ood's heart is. I think it's good for showing the weaknesses of the Doctor. They can't actually save everyone, since the universe is so full of aliens and creatures that there's no way to be able to do it. It shows that flaw in the Doctor's empathy, since they can never truly achieve their goal of saving everyone. Sometimes they fail. Donna then tries to make friends with the Ood, which is a very human moment for her. She's faced with this strange dying alien, not knowing what to do either because this is such an awful and heartbreaking situation for her to face so suddenly. She is fresh off the back of being unable to save the people of Pompeii, and also being unable to save the life of Miss Foster, so she's once again being put in this position of hopelessness, unable to save yet another life. It sharply brings her back down to reality, even though she's so far from home. It's a good way of keeping the show grounded, even with these otherworldly stories, along with pushing Donna down that character path of growing as a person, and becoming more sympathetic compared to her first appearance in the show. Donna has this front to hide the insecurity and humaneness underneath, which comes through a lot in this episode.
There you are, sweetheart. We were too late.
Then we find out exactly when and where the Doctor and Donna are, since they're on the Ood sphere in the 42nd century. This scene is mostly known by fans for referencing the season 1 story The Censorites, which is the second First Doctor reference in a row after Fires of Pompeii referenced the Romans. However, I think this scene is also a stark parallel to the end of the world, where the Doctor and Rose reflected upon the end of planet Earth whilst celebrating how the human race spread out and made a home amongst the stars. This is a very similar moment since Donna gets this glimpse into the far future, future. Even with global warming, disasters, and all sorts of issues in the present day, the human race perseveres and survives against all odds. Even with all the adversity, we managed to create a massive, sprawling empire spanning 3 galaxies, which is pretty impressive when you ask me, because that's a lot of ground to cover. It's one of the things the Doctor loves so much about our species, because we have that knack of survival, never giving up and always finding a way to keep going against all odds. It's why the character is so enamoured with us, and why they come to Earth so much, defending it with such determination and loyalty. I just think it's a nice scene that mirrors that end of the world scene, once again showing the optimism and hope for the future, even if the Doctor doesn't quite know whether we're explorers or a virus, since the human race built this second great and bountiful empire off the back of Ood's slaves. Indeed, this episode is all about diving into the reality of the Ood and their nature as servants to the humans of this time period. When we first met them in the Impossible Planet, the idea had just kind of been glossed over by everyone involved, so I'm glad that the story gets a sequel of sorts here to further explore the reality of the situation, seeing the stuff we didn't see there. The Doctor and Donna then arrive at the complex, where the setting of Sonic 06 welcomes them and introduces their guided tour. Much like the cold open, it shows the shocking normalisation of this intergalactic slave trade. This is being treated like a guided tour of a Cadbury's factory, not a glorified slave auction. I really like the sequence of the tour, since it's intercut with shots of an Ood being chased down and slaughtered by the security guards. It's a really good moment because it shows the sharp contrast between the rosy and clean outwards presentation of the company compared to the reality behind it all. Even though they make all of these claims about the Ood and how they treat them, at the end of the day the reality is that they just treat them like cattle, not giving them any rights and exploiting them. Kind of like Amazon, then. Companies will go to any length to make a profit, so this treatment of the Ood has to be one of the biggest cover-ups in the history of the universe, because their entire backstory and purpose has been twisted, faked and manipulated to turn them into slaves. They don't really offer themselves as slaves, they're bred into it, forced into it, and nobody knows about this, thinking they're just happy to help, not taking the time to think about what the Ood want in life. There's an irony in Solana's line about the Ood being a reflection of humanity, since they exploit these creatures and gun them down if they try to escape. I think it shows that cynicism a lot of the Davies era stories have, making humans the monsters in unique, morally questionable ways. Usually it's a cliche, but this is one of the episodes that really benefits from this narrative, because the company is so desperate to hide the truth from the public. The Ood are essentially showcased like Siri or Amazon Echo, since you can get these wacky responses from them. However, the difference is that the Ood are sentient, living beings, whereas Siri and Alexa are robots. It's okay to do this kind of stuff with them, but it's very wrong to do it with an Ood. These are walking, breathing creatures, not pieces of lifeless metal. However, because Donna has that human touch, she brings up the question of the Ood's freedom. Rose had done the same in the Impossible Planet, questioning why people find it acceptable to use them this way, but it still got glossed over and she just kind of accepted what she was told, because she's the worst companion. However, Donna is a lot more inquisitive about it because she's still so fresh from regular life, compared to Rose, who had already been quite desensitized by that point. Donna is absolutely right to ask if there are any free Ood. We're constantly being told they offer themselves, but there's never really been an unbiased source saying that. It's only been the slave masters and the conditioned slaves saying it's totally okay. Unlike these people in the 42nd century, Donna knows about human history and the horrors of slavery, because these are still contemporary issues that you just need to pick up a history textbook to read about. So she knows this kind of treatment is completely wrong. Both the Doctor and Donna can tell there's something a bit off about this whole situation, with the alarms and overly peachy presentation. So it's good that they decide to look a little bit deeper, peeking under that corporate curtain to find the lies underneath. One of the first things they see off the beaten track is an Ood getting straight up whipped, confirming that these aliens aren't butlers, they're literal slaves. There's no way of dressing it up or skirting around it, that's what they are. I also like that the Doctor admits he never really thought about the reality of the Ood before, because he was so distracted by the whole devil situation and couldn't even save them. They had been innocent creatures who were just possessed by the beast. What they did in that episode wasn't their fault, they had no control, but they had to die because the Doctor couldn't go back for them. Here he's faced with the truth about the Ood, and it creates a sense of consequences. This is more than just a sequel. It's a chance for the Doctor to right his wrongs in that earlier episode, seeing how severe the situation really is.
I was busy. So busy I couldn't save them, I had to let the Ood die. I reckon I owe them one.
The Doctor and Donna then find themselves in a massive warehouse filled with cargo containers populated by rows and rows of Ood, waiting to be shipped out across the Empire. It really drives home just how depersonalized these creatures have become, forced into becoming such commodities without any freedom. The concept of freedom doesn't even exist to them, because they've been bred in such a restrictive and inhumane way. This life of servitude is all they know, because they haven't seen anything different, so the perception of them offering themselves to us is based solely on their inability to do anything else. They're on a perpetual conveyor belt. It's a horrible truth to be exposed to, especially because it mirrors our own history and existence. The very society we live in has been built off the back of slavery, whether we know about it or not. Like the Doctor says,
Boy, I haven't got slaves.
Who do you think made your clothes?
from 79 AD to the 42nd century, the slave trade still exists because that's just how our species operates, off the backs of others. It's another good reality check for Donna, showing how this isn't so different from her own time after all, even if she's very much against slavery. And personally, I think that's one of the central cores of the episode. It's an exploration of how people unknowingly benefit from this exploitation, because we don't ask, we don't question it. There are always excuses since we feel like it's not our problem, but it is. Donna doesn't question the true origin of her clothes, just like how the people buying Ood know deep down that they are being bred this way and forced down this path, but they just look the other way. It's that idea of being unknowingly complicit that shows how dangerous this kind of treatment is, because even if you're against it, you're still contributing to it because you just don't know how deep it goes. Because this is a very slow-paced and heavy episode, you need some kind of action to keep the viewers interested, and this comes as security locate the Doctor and Donna, capturing her and chasing him, with Commander Kess strangely deciding to use a claw to chase him, cackling like a personality-less evil villain without any nuance. I'm just not quite sure the scene needed to be included, because the plan is utterly ridiculous and it almost exists only to be a fancy showpiece, to inject some action into the episode. It serves no purpose at all, since the Doctor and Donna just get captured and then escape anyway, so I don't get why we needed this weird chase sequence put in. There are no consequences to it, since all that needed to happen was the duo getting captured at the door. There just wasn't any need for this sequence in my opinion, especially because the Ood get red-eye and attack the guards, allowing the Doctor and Donna to escape. As I said, there's no consequence to the set piece, it could have easily been cut and you wouldn't have noticed. However, I do like the establishment of the scale of the issue. We find out that there are thousands of Ood with a red eye and it's only getting worse. It creates good stakes since we know how many Ood are out there, how many people they could kill if they become rabid like this. It's good for setting up those stakes, but who exactly are we supposed to be worried for? Every character in this story is thoroughly unlikable and irredeemable, constantly making themselves eviler without any shades of grey. Even in the opportunities where they can be redeemed or see the error of their ways, they just do another evil thing. There's that moment where the Doctor offers for Solana to help them, just for her to betray them and call for the guards. Even director Graham Harper and actor Roger Griffiths on the DVD commentary got confused, because she has no reason to do so. It's just a very strange moment. I get why they're so unforgivable, because they are so evil for treating you this way, but it also means these stakes don't really work, because you end up rooting for the slaves to kill their slavers. Throughout the episode, the Doctor has been able to hear the Ood singing, with Donna not hearing it for some reason. Eventually they find themselves in part of the complex where they come across natural Ood, who haven't been processed into the servants we're so used to seeing, and now the Doctor knows the source of the song. It's that idea of free Ood Donna has been talking about, finally seeing them as they're supposed to be in a natural setting. The singing the Doctor has been hearing is their song of captivity, and you can see it shaken even him up, since he can feel their pain in his mind this entire episode, constantly hearing this song. I think the fact that Donna can't hear it is once again reminiscent of not knowing the truth. She doesn't have to deal with hearing the song, just like how she doesn't have to confront the slavery going on in the present day world she lives in. When the Doctor makes her hear the song, it really hurts her. She can't even last a few seconds with it in her mind. I think it shows just how intense their pain is, since just a glimpse into their world shakes her to her core, showing her the truth of their awful lives under this empire that exploits them. She's being confronted with this horrific, truly painful reality, and much like in Fires of Pompeii, you can't blame her for having this reaction. It's to be expected. I think it also shows just how strong the Doctor has to be emotionally, since Donna realises he can't switch it off like she can. He has to hear it this whole time. There's no hiding from it, no ignoring this suffering. Ever since they arrived, he's had to hear this agony, these creatures crying out into the darkness. You see how hard it hit Donna, but the Doctor has managed to remain stoic and upbeat throughout, serving as a testament to what the character has to deal with on a daily basis, seeing all of these horrors of the universe. I think it's why the Doctor is such a bastion for good, because they have to constantly see this suffering everywhere they go, constantly being faced with these situations and having to fight for the oppressed, becoming the voice of the voiceless.
What are you gonna do then? Arrest me! Lock me up and throw me in a cage? Well, you're too late. Ha!
Then it turns out the Ood are literally voiceless. Well, kind of, because they can talk psychically. It's revealed that the translation balls are actually forced upon them by the company, because they're naturally born with secondary brains in their hands. The Ood we've been seeing this entire time have actually had all their emotions and free will torn from them. That's why they're so obedient, because they're forced to be emotionless. Like the Doctor says, it's the equivalent of a lobotomy, taking everything away from someone, all their memories, feelings, even their name and sense of self. I think this is a great reveal because it drives home the personal effects of slavery, taking all this away from someone and forcing them into a life of servitude by not allowing them to know any better. It's truly horrifying, completely recontextualizing every Ood we've seen before, and showing their horrific mutilation, along with revealing the real extent of human exploitation of these creatures. As Donna points out, they're born with their brain in their hands, so they have to be peaceful, since they wouldn't be able to survive otherwise. They're naturally defenseless. But here the humans come blundering in and turn them into slaves just because they can, not even stopping to think about what they're doing. It's worse than we ever imagined, displaying the true horror of this universe. I think Donna is right to want to go home after seeing this. The runaway bride gave her this brief glimpse of an exciting life with the Doctor, and partners in crime reinforced that. She was given this snapshot of what it's like to go on these adventures, but Fires of Pompeii and Planet of the Ood show her the reality of it, how it's not always fun, you have to see all this pain and make these horrible decisions. She's been emotionally tortured 2 episodes in a row, and I think it's great for that character journey, adding so much humanity and sympathy to her characterization.
Take it away.
Sure.
I can't bear it.
The natural Ood then increase their song, amplifying it to cause red-eye across the complex, creating havoc as they kill the humans who came to buy them. Again, none of the human characters were presented as likeable, so you're happy to see them die. It is a slave uprising after all. Why would you root for the oppressors? I also think that the song being the catalyst for the revolution could be seen as a reflection of the power of song during the American slave trade. There are so many songs with origins from that time. These songs were ways to boost morale and pass the time during their horrible work days, creating a sense of community spirit and hope, since most of them were religious songs calling on God for help. However, these songs also had coded messages to spread throughout the slave community in the Underground Railroad. I feel like this is a very strong link to Planet of the Ood, because the Ood have these songs of captivity, and they use the power of their songs to rise up against their oppressors. It's a really good mirror to reflect that real-world slavery we're familiar with, furthering the Ood as a striking allegory for these realities of our own world. The episode then descends into all-out warfare, and I really like this sequence, the flames and gunfire creating a great sense of chaos. It's a good use of action compared to the earlier Claw chase scene, since it's so frenzied and chaotic. It really feels urgent. Throughout the episode, there has been a mystery surrounding Warehouse 15, with something in there that's heavily linked to the Ood in some way, controlling their red-eye outbreaks. This becomes the final stage of the episode, all the surviving characters converging on there. This mysterious object turns out to be the Ood brain, which psychically links them all together and serves as the core of their hive mind. They're all connected through this song in their brain, it binds them together. This is how the company has managed to make the Ood into slaves, because it's hard to have that freedom when the central brain in your hive mind is enslaved. I think it shows how important this group thinking is for the Ood. Together they have these songs and this common peaceful existence, so it's together they can gain their freedom. It then turns out that Dr. Ryder was sympathetic to the Ood this whole time, having sabotaged the brain to increase the red-eye uprising and accelerate this plan to free them. I both like and dislike this reveal, because on the positive side, it shows that not all the humans in the story are comically evil and unlikable, giving this glimmering ray of hope. But it also just comes so out of the blue and he dies instantly, so it's a bit sudden and ineffective, not really having much of a bearing on the plot itself. Kleiman then prepares to shoot the Doctor and Donna, only to find out that the hair tonic he's been drinking this whole time has been slowly converting him into an Ood. This is quite a wacky reveal, but I quite like it. This whole time Kleiman has been exploiting the Ood and selling them off as emotionless slaves with no personality, but rather than killing him, they turn him into one of them. It's the ultimate revenge, true justice, because he doesn't get away with a quick death. He has to become one of the very species he made his career off, creating quite a sense of irony. His actual transformation into an Ood is honestly horrific, since he peels off the skin on his head and coughs up a brain. It's such a creepy visual, and I wouldn't be surprised if it gave people nightmares at the time. The Doctor then frees the Ood and they join together to sing that beautiful song of freedom. I really love this piece of music. It's so hopeful and sweet, signifying a new beginning. The chains have been broken and they're free to live their own lives now. It's the perfect ending to an episode like this, really resembling a hopeful future for the Ood after so many years as mindless slaves. Roger Griffiths on the DVD commentary compared this moment to the Christmas truce of 1914, and I think that's a great observation, because it is a very peaceful moment. The Ood and the humans no longer at odds, the Ood just wanting to sing and the soldiers putting down their weapons. It adds a lot of emotion and power to the moment. The final scene is also a great tease towards the end of the Doctor's life, with that single line.
I think your song must end soon.
Meaning?
Every song must end.
It hadn't yet been confirmed David Tennant was leaving the show, but this is a great way to seed his coming death, since the Ood have these psychic abilities, just like the soothsayers of the previous episode, who read his mind and predicted the series 4 finale.
Your real name is hidden. It burns in the stars, in the cascade of Medusa herself.
Planet of the Ood is an episode I've always flip-flopped on over the years. There have been times where I found it a bit forgettable and insignificant, but I've really gained a deeper appreciation for it recently. It's a really solid episode with a great exploration of the horrors of slavery and the realities of exploiting people and creatures this way. It's a great way to reuse the Ood after their initial appearance in the Impossible Planet felt unexplored, so this is a good sequel of sorts, addressing how the Doctor didn't think about their nature as a slave, and atoning for him leaving those Ood behind to die. It develops them as aliens within this complex universe, showing there's so much more to them than we were initially shown. I think that David Tennant and Catherine Tate are wonderful as always, especially during the scene with the natural Ood and Donna hearing their song, but there are also quite a lot of moments where I thought the script fell short. The crane action set piece and the one-dimensional human characters really detract from the story in my opinion, so I would rank it as a B on the Series 4 tier list. For the very heavy and delicate themes it had to explore and deal with, I think it was very well done, with the Ood as a great allegory and the story really making you question how our society has functioned and continues to function based on the exploitation of others. According to the commentary track of the episode, Keith Temple's original drafts were too dark for Doctor Who, so I really wonder what those were like. Planet of the Ood is one of those very moving and significant Doctor Who episodes that poses a lot of interesting questions to the viewer, which is what science fiction is meant to do at the end of the day. When Doctor Who sets its sight on making a strong, sobering statement, it sometimes falls very short, but Planet of the Ood is one of those episodes that soars elegantly because of this kind of storytelling. And I'd like to give an extra special thank you to my gold level patrons, Daniel Shillito, John, Mark Hippold Guy Taylor, and Stephanie Nevin Miller. Thank you a lot for your support.